So we should be going live.
Are we live?
We're now live.
Great,
That's
we're
good.
live. Good.
That's
Here we are again. Another Thursday
Here
in
we
the
are.
lockdown.
Here we are. So,
Welcome if you're watching. Already.
Welcome. How many people have we got so far?
20 people.
20 people.
Gosh, that's great.
Good. Good. Well, I hope you're comfortable. Got a cup of tea.
Yeah. This is the kind of casual
Start.
chat. This is like if you come to the London Buddhist Centre. This is like what we hope. People chat to you and talk
In the
to
reception room.
you. This is Matt.
Oh, Matt.
No,
Matt.
stop.
What else? Matt.
This is Matt. He's helping tonight.
He's going to be moderating. And David, where are you, David?
I am here. Oh, you want to see?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
it, yeah. That's it. This is David.
David's doing the camera work and technical work.
So we all live upstairs. Most of you know that by now, but some of you, what we're noticing, people tuning in from all over the world. So, here we are in London, in the UK, in Bethnal Green. So. What are you looking at me for?
I thought you were going to say something interesting.
Yes, I had a sense that I was going to say something interesting, but I couldn't think of anything interesting to
It's
say.
going to be down to me tonight, isn't
Yeah,
it?
you're the interest tonight. I'm just the.
Okay, folks. Well, you know what you're in for.
I'm just
We've adjusted the lighting.
Yeah,
Is that better?
very carefully adjusted the lighting.
Yeah.
That's better.
Okay.
Oh,
We've
good.
got 53 people. So
53.
Okay, that's great. Let's hear some
2 more
names.
minutes. Names.
Let's have some names.
We've got Paul from Sheffield.
Paul,
welcome,
hello.
welcome, Paul. Hooray! And I hope
Right.
Paddy's watching too, Paul.
Yes,
We
I
want
thought
Paddy to watch.
we both watched the video.
We did watch the video.
Yeah, which is very
I
good.
want Paddy here.
Rafi?
Rafi,
Yeah, that's good.
welcome,
Hello,
Rafi. Where are you, Rafi? Are you in North London somewhere?
He's still at work, probably.
Yeah.
Who else have we got?
Welcome, Rafi.
Anyone from anywhere else apart from the UK? Nothing wrong with the UK, of course. But
I think the furthest we go so far is Brighton.
well,
Well, welcome from Brighton.
Brighton. What's wrong with
What's
Brighton?
wrong with Brighton? Exactly. We've often said that.
Yeah. Brighton's bracing air and all that. Just to quote to you,
You're welcome.
Yeah, welcome everybody. We'll start in a minute or so, but we always tune in first so that people can gradually gather. So make sure you've got a cup of tea or whatever you want. Make sure you're comfortable, and we'll kick off properly in a minute or so. Yeah.
Oh, we
So
are.
tune in. Oh, we are. Yeah.
Shall we?
Shall we start?
Let's start.
Okay, good. Welcome everyone. Welcome to the London Buddhist Centre.
Welcome.
My name's Maitreyabandhu,
And I'm Jnanavaca.
and this is week 3, I think, isn't it? Yeah, week 3 of our exploration of a parable, a story from the White Lotus Sutra. White Lotus Sutra is an early Mahayana text, a central text of Buddhism, you could say, simply. And in this text, embedded in this text, are these wonderful parables. One of them is the parable of the burning house, which we've been exploring. I'll say a little bit more about where we've got to in the parable in a minute. Just before I say that, just to remind everyone watching that the LBC is we've effectively gone online, so you can join us any weekday evening at 7 p.m. Every weekday evening at 7 p.m.
And in the mornings.
and in the mornings. Well, we're not yet there yet, but
Okay.
we're getting there.
Okay.
But yeah,
Well, that's very good for meditation.
well, that's a Zoom one.
Oh, it's not a
No,
live
no,
stream
no,
one.
no,
Fair enough. Okay.
I'm supposed to be the host this evening, so it's going well so far.
There's also this book.
Yes, there's also that book. So this is Sandraksha's Bhante. As we call him Bhante, that means a reverend teacher. He's the founder of the Triratna Buddhist order, and he wrote a book on the White Lotus Sutra, the drama of cosmic enlightenment. But the reason we've chosen these parables from the sutra, and we might see which other parables we might go on to, not just from this sutra. Parable as a form, it's an ancient storytelling form. The parable is a very simple story. You don't have individual characterizations in a parable. But when the thing about a parable is, we're finding, I mean, Jnanavaca and I have been looking at this parable for, 20, 30 years, something like that. every time I talk about it, I know every time Jnanavaca talks about it, you keep discovering more things in him. It's as if a parable, if it's a great parable, and I think the parables from the burning house are great parables in your capital G, that they're alive. They kind of become intimate with you and with your life. And as you tell the parable, and I think this is one of the ancient meanings of story, as you tell story, they change, they take on the meanings and the intimate meanings and even the historical meanings of the time. But they do that in this richly imaginative way, rather than just a sort of list of abstractions. So we're exploring parable because every time we've done so much of this sort of thing that you discover more and more in it. So the story so far, I mean, it's a very simple story. And I'm not even sure we'll finish it tonight. Let's see. We don't need to.
I'm not quite sure how far we'll get.
Yeah. So you might continue next week. Just to say, this is the third week, so you can look on our YouTube channel and you'll see week 1 and week 2 as well. So do go back and listen to the others. So basically, the parable is this: that you have to imagine a mansion, an apparently beautiful, grand, huge mansion. And you've got this man, the elder, he's called, who's clearly a figure of the Buddha, standing outside this apparently beautiful mansion. What you then discover in the parable is that the mansion, even though it looks beautiful, is actually, it's full of rotten timbers. It's crumbling, it's falling apart, it's half derelict in places. There's almost parts of the mansion that are really derelict, in other places parts that are more pristine. It's haunted. We were saying, I can't remember which week, but we were saying that these are the ghosts. You could think of them as the ghosts of the past, the ghosts of history, the ghosts of ideology, for instance. One of the striking things about the 20th century is it was a century of ideology. People were murdered in millions because of ideas in people's minds. Literally, that came from somebody's mind, an idea about Jewish people or an idea about particular political forms. They're like ghosts that then haunt a whole culture. So these ghosts in the mansion are you could think of them as the ghosts of history, working on us and making us behave in ways that, had we not been haunted, we would never have behaved like that.
Of the present as well.
Yes, the ghosts of the present. And it's very easy to think that those ghosts, those were the ghosts of history then. We're free from them, but we're haunted now. We're all haunted. Do you know how it's like when you sometimes do things that later you think, why ever did I do that? Or you look back on, I don't know, for me, look back on the 1980s and the sort of behaviours that were fine then. You sort of think, how could that have been fine? Yeah? So
and the music.
And the music, yeah. Well, we never thought. Anyway, the fashion. Although apparently 1980s fashion is really back in. Anyway, that's another matter. So you have to imagine this great house, this mansion, that is crumbling, crumbling, and that crumbling, and it's haunted, and that crumbling is, of course, a symbol for the fact that everything is impermanent. You know, that's the great symbol for that matter. That this apparently beautiful, stable world that is being imagined as a unit, as a mansion, as a building, is actually crumbling. It's impermanent. Yeah, absolutely crucial Buddhist point, imaginatively rendered, and it's haunted by the ghosts of ideology, the ghosts of history, the ghosts of our own history, and the ghosts of the present that are the cultural forces of the present that are making us act in certain sort of ways. And the other thing to say about these houses, it's full of children, and the children are playing games. They're very, very absorbed in their games, playing these games in the house, in the mansion. And then in a moment, in that fairy tale moment where something happens, where really it's saying it's always happening, but in fairy tale it always says it happened. Actually, it's always a symbol, I think, for it's always happening. The mansion suddenly bursts into flames, into terrifying flames. The Buddha, the elder outside, sees the danger that his children are in, and in the parable, they're his children. We've explored that, but so I won't go into that. But they're his children. he wants, obviously, doesn't want to save them. That's just what he has to do. It's not a question of choice. Shall I save them or not? Just like any parent, it's I must save them. They must be saved. So he tries to think, how can I save them? So first of all, he thinks I'll rush in and grab one and pull it out, and realizes he can't do that. There are too many children, and they're all just playing around. They don't realize the danger they're in. He can't rush in and grab one, and then he thinks, well, I could this is how I read it. Well, how about I go and put them on a bench and carry a bench out? And we talked about this last week. I was saying that's redemption through politics, but look back at last week for that. He realizes, actually the door's too narrow, I can't do that. So what he does is he calls to them. Yeah, he calls to them. And he says, you're in great danger. You're in terrible danger. Yeah. And where we got to last week is that the children are so absorbed in their games, they don't realize the fire, and they mostly don't hear the call. Or if they occasionally, in the sutta it says it beautifully, occasionally they glance through the door to the Buddha outside. They just give him a glance occasionally, that's all. So yeah, that's where we got to, these children absorbed in the games. I just want to say one more thing about these games, because they're prestige games, they're blame games, they're poor me games. They're the games we play. And as you get older, the children are a metaphor for being immature, aren't they? And
spiritually immature.
Immature. So what game playing is immature. Yeah. And you sometimes meet people who are very game playing, almost trapped in game playing, and you experience them as very immature. The metaphor doesn't quite allow for less and less immature games, but let's leave that. But so you can think of them as individual games that people play. But during the week I was thinking, well, situations, environments, even institutions, even workplaces have collective games. So, if you're working in the financial sector, there's the game of how long you can stay in the office. There's a game of how early do you get to your desk and how late do you leave. Before you know it, even if I've met friends of mine who determined not to play that game, but before you know it, you tend to conform to the culture that you're part of. When I was first coming along, I was very much involved in a kind of therapy game almost, where we'd be sitting around and kind of rehearsing our inner pain. Now, there is a place for talking, obviously, about one's inner pain and one's childhood and so on, but it became a bit of a game that we all played for a while. We all did psychology. So I think any culture that you're in, and that can be a family, it can be a workplace, often has its own kind of games. And you can end up being drawn, sometimes unwittingly, into the games around you. It's quite difficult to not conform with the culture around you. And that's why a culture that's encouraging the best out of you, that's encouraging you to grow up, to take responsibility, to be courageous, to tell the truth, to be kind to each other, to make friends, which is what we're trying to do here. Because as well, there are games, I'm sure, the Buddhist games, spiritual games, religious games. There isn't a place in the world without games. But what you're trying to do is create a culture in which you're trying as best as you can to draw the best out of each other. And that's what we're trying to do here at the London Buddhist Centre. In a way, that's one of the reasons why Jnanavaca and I wanted to do this together, because we live upstairs together with friends like David and Matt. We're trying to, upstairs, create an atmosphere in which we don't play games, or we don't play childish games. We try to create a culture in which friendship, honesty, courage, telling the truth, being kind, thinking, actually trying to think rather than just opinionate and rehearse opinions. That's what we're trying to do, more or less effectively, but that's what we're trying to do. So that's another thought I had whilst between the week about games. It's not just individual games, it's collective games, it's cultural games. So before Jnanavaca explores a bit more of the parable, let's just spend a few minutes meditating together, really just as a way of entering a different space, because I don't know, probably like me, you've been on Zoom a lot, or I've been on the phone most of the day. So probably what we all need just now is a change of atmosphere, change of pace. So when you're ready, closing your eyes. And as soon as you've closed your eyes, see if you can feel your body. So when we're spending so much time on the screen like this, it's quite easy to become rather separate from your body sensations, almost alienated from them. So all you need to do just now is engage with your body sensations. So just start really simply with the weight of your body on the cushions. And really engage with the sense of your body being supported. Notice your feet on the floor. So when we're exploring parable or story or myths, they're all instances of the imagination. And our imagination comes from our body. It tends to be our fantasies that come from our head. So the more rooted we are in the body, the more our imagination can flourish. And just see if you can soften your brow, soften your eyes. Soften your jaw. And then as best as you can, see if you can release your shoulders. And you might just imagine your shoulders relaxing. And again, see if you can soften your belly. We tend to habitually grip with our belly. And we do that habitually, automatically. And actually, if you can soften your belly, you start to kind of change gear from this very heady, goal-orientated kind of way of being to something more embodied. So there's your weight on the cushions or the chair, your feet on the floor. Just imagining your whole system calming down, quietening down. Calming the body, calming the mind. And just taking a few breaths, so following your breath in and your breath out, and if you can, particularly follow your out-breath, the whole of your out-breath. If you focus a bit more on the out-breath, it'll help your whole system calm down. And letting the breath in, following the whole breath out. And then extending your awareness to include more of your body. And the weight of your body on the chair. Your feet on the floor. Tuning into the sounds around you, wherever you are just now. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Jnanavaca now, and he's going to carry on this exploration of the parable of the burning house from the White Lotus Sutra.
Thank you. Thanks, Maitreyabandhu. And yeah, welcome from me. In what seems to be a bit of a timeless realm that some of us seem to be occupying. I hope that you're well and that people that you love and know are well. If you are well, I suspect that the days are merging into one another. I can't remember what day of the week it is and what date it is, and often retreats do that as well, that time seems to bend and distort, and at its best, my experience is that you sort of enter into a timeless realm at its best. At its worst, of course, it just becomes endless in a tedious way, and is hard to stay with. Anyway, I hope you're doing well, both physically and in other ways. So yes, I want to carry on exploring this parable. Before I do so, though, I must remember I have a fan. My youngest fan is Paddy, who is 3.5, maybe 3.5. Yeah. And Paddy in Sheffield, I got a video of his ferry, him making a big Lego brick ferry, and he listens to my talks, and his dad Paul was asking him about my talks, and Paddy said that maybe he'll mention the ferry in the next one. And so, Paddy, I really liked the ferry. I thought it was a great ferry. I particularly liked the tree and the numbers on the ferry and the propeller. They were the best bits. Really good ferry. And I look forward to seeing the fire engine, Paddy. So, yes, I said I'd do that. So, back to the parable. In a way, like kids playing with their toys is fine, isn't it? It's adults playing the games that becomes the problem, as Maitreyabandhu was saying. Kids are sort of fine, innocently playing. Play is what kids should do. And our games, we tend to take them so seriously. That's part of the problem, isn't it? If we could be light-hearted about the games, how silly we are, in a way the games wouldn't be so problematic. As you were talking, I will move on with the story, but as you were talking, I was thinking about one of the reasons parables are so powerful is that they're universal, and therefore they speak to us in all times. And there's something about this parable particularly which seems to keep pointing to the universal. So the children, for example, are collective. They're not differentiated. Of course, they will be different. You could imagine them as different ages and genders and so on, temperaments, characters. But in the parable, they're just a collective called the children. And that's because how I read that is compared to the larger situation that they're in, i.e. a crumbling, burning house, their differences aren't important. Their differences don't matter compared to the larger, more urgent existential situation, the reality of their situation. You could say, oh yes, there's a brown one, blonde one, brunette one, old one, young one. But do you see, that would be irrelevant as far as the story is concerned, as far as the parable is concerned. And I can't help but think our situation is similar. We will, of course, all be in very different situations, having very different experiences, and yet what is more important is true for all of us. It's a uniting universal. And Buddhism, I think, points to universals. It points to what's important for all of us. It points to the human situation. Yes, it gives us individual paths and says, if you're particularly fond of sense desire, then work on this meditation. If you're particularly prone to anger and aversion, then work on this practice. It gives us individual tools and practices for our own temperaments and our own situations. But primarily what it's concerned with is all things are impermanent. Suffering is a truth of reality for all of us. Whatever our individual situation, it's trying to say, no, there's a way out. There's a way out of the human predicament that we're all in. And that's why I think parables speak to us, because the imagination is somehow a faculty that detects universals. I mean, it sees particulars as well, of course, but it puts those particulars in a universal context, so that a tree is not just a tree, it becomes a symbol for something. We've had some beautiful weather, and my desk where I sit is opposite a window. So I was just gazing outside at my window at the trees and the sunlight and the sky, and this seagull flew right past my window. This beautiful seagull, just really close. So I was feet away from this seagull at my height. It was flying, and of course the seagull knows nothing of the pandemic or human problems. And for a moment, I just felt, oh yes, I share this planet with this as well. There's this reality as well. There's life in ways that I don't comprehend all around us. Do you see, a particular can point to a universal? That's what I'm trying to say. That was an act of imagination. It's the imagination that takes the particulars and finds in them universal truths. And a parable is trying to awaken our imagination to see the universal in our individual predicament. Because the trouble with just focusing on the individual, I'm not saying we shouldn't, but what happens with me anyway is that then I just focus on me and my wants and my immediate desires. How do I gratify them? I've been craving an iPad recently, an iPad Air, and I'm not going anywhere with an iPad, am I? I'm not. It would be great to have an iPad so that when I'm at a meeting elsewhere, but I'm not going anywhere. I do not need an iPad, least of all now. Anyway, so when I focus on particulars, it's so often self-referential. Not always, but often. Anyway, I want to move on with the story, or at least explore more this idea of the call, the call of the Buddha, the elder in this case, from outside the house. We've talked a little bit about the significance of him being outside the house, calling. And the children, the kids, hear the call, but don't heed it. In fact, most of them don't properly hear it. Occasionally they glance at the elder while running up and down, playing their games. And his call is, you're in danger, you're in danger, get out of the house. They're too happy, preoccupied with their pleasures to even heed the fact that the elder is calling them, their father is calling them, let alone take account of what he's actually saying, which is the danger. The danger's everywhere, they can't see it. And of course that's very obvious dharmically, that the house is on fire, our house is on fire always. But the fact that they don't heed the call is a symbol for their lack of receptivity, for their lack of their dharmic receptivity. And I think dharmic receptivity is, something that we all need to cultivate. I need to cultivate more of. It's not always easy to know how to cultivate. One of the things with receptivity is that it could easily shade into passivity. And I don't mean passivity. I do mean that if we're going to heed the call, we also need to be working actively on our minds. So for example, I hope that you have been able to set up a regular meditation practice, daily meditation practice, maybe more than once a day. I've been encouraging people to also do pujas at home if they want, if that helps. Have a shrine. I hope you've done all of those things. If not, do that. We need to actively be setting up the conditions to work on our minds. Always, but now perhaps particularly. And we need to be actively practicing kindness and generosity in whatever ways we can. We need to be looking at our self-centered tendencies and trying to counter them with kindness and generosity as much as we can. We also need to be reflecting. So it's really good that I think we've got 122 people watching, and part of what we're trying to do is stimulate reflection. We're not giving you information that you don't already know. Of course you know. We're trying to stimulate reflection as a practice. It's an active practice to reflect. So I'd really urge you to use this time if you do have time. And I know some of you might be working really hard and have less time than normal. But if you do have time, listen to Dharma talks, read Dharma books, reflect on the Dharma as much as you can. So activity is really, really important. But then it's not enough. Activity is not enough. What we need to learn is also to somehow listen and be receptive to the voice of the Buddha that is calling, always calling us. And that requires a certain degree of stillness and silence and openness. It's Keats's negative capability. It's a live openness, not a passivity. It's not inert. It's vital. It's fresh. It's living, but it's completely open to anything that arises. And without that sort of element in our practice, I think that we kind of we run out of steam. Even the sort of dharmic activities become dry, counterproductive even. So I think one of the reasons the children aren't receptive is that they're active all the time. They're playing all the time. They're running around. The parable says they're running backwards and forwards. They must be, as children do. They've got lots of energy, but they're not still enough to hear the call of their father. So I was thinking, well, how do we cultivate receptivity? And I'm going to just say a few ways. I mean, there's lots. One is spend a little bit of time, if we can, doing nothing every day. What I've been encouraging some people who I've been talking to is to make sure that if they're meditating, that at the end of the meditation, they don't come out of meditation too quickly, that they spend 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, just sitting, absorbing their experience, not trying to do anything, just being receptive. If you're meditating more than once a day, even just have a period of just sitting, where you just sit in meditative posture, or in an armchair. You don't even have to sit in meditation. Sit in a comfortable chair, just do nothing. Maybe just look out of the window, look for the birds, the seagull, see what you can see without any purpose. In a way, allow yourself to play in a really intelligent, receptive way. That's one way of doing things. Some periods of doing nothing. I think also receptivity, dharmic receptivity, is our innate faculty, innate ability in consciousness. It's the innate aspect of consciousness that responds to value, that responds to meaning. That's what dharmic receptivity means. Excuse me. It responds to truth, to goodness, to beauty. And when it responds, the heart opens. When you hear the truth, I mean universal truths, when you see something beautiful, when you see kindness, the heart opens. And then we're closer to the call. We're closer to hearing the voice of the elder. So that faculty is intrinsic in all human consciousness. It's there. We do have a response to truth and beauty and goodness, but it gets covered over. It gets covered over by the games. It gets covered over by the haunted voices. It gets covered over by egotism. So part of dharmic receptivity is learning to uncover this responsiveness to value, to meaning, and find ways of doing that. So looking for beauty in your experience is one way of doing that. Not just like we've been listening to beautiful music and things, but also in the everyday, in the ordinary. Look for beauty. It's almost like you look with the eyes of aesthetic appreciation, and then beauty appears in everything, in everything. So see if you can cultivate that aesthetic response, those eyes. Particularly if you've got time on your hands. It's such a rich and rewarding thing to do. You have to be a bit patient, but you can do it if you sit quietly and just look for beauty. Notice what is lovely around you. Goodness also. There's so much on the news that is about horror and death and suffering and sickness, of course. But also there's stories of kindness, and maybe you don't look to the news for kindness. Look around you. There are people being kind to each other. That's one of the beautiful things that's happening at the moment, as well as the sort of horrors of what's happening. Human beings are prepared to show kindness again to strangers. So look for that. Participate in that field of kindness. And that adds to the receptivity of the call. And then truth, read the Dharma, reflect on the Dharma, reflect on these universals, let it in, meditate on it even. Take some of the Dharmic teachings, take a teaching like impermanence into your meditation if you want to, if you can. So if we cultivate actively this responsiveness to truth and beauty and goodness, to value, to meaning, we cultivate a dharmic receptivity, which is anything but passivity. Truth, beauty and goodness with a capital T and G and B are what the Buddha and Dharma and Sangha represent in other terms, of course. And in a way they're calling to us all the time. That it's like life is calling us to wake up to value, to meaning, to what's really important. And I think I sometimes talk about doing deathbed reflections. It might be too scary for you, but I've been reflecting on the fact that I could die. I mean, I know all of us could die, but I've been really trying to reflect that I'm not too old to die, and I'm not too old for this virus to kill me. I'm not invincible to this virus. I've been really trying to reflect on that, and if I can do it with enough love in my heart, with enough metta in my heart, and shraddha in my heart, faith in my heart, then actually something more mysterious and beautiful opens up. Something wonderful opens up. The reason I say that is sometimes I'm hesitant to talk about this sort of thing because I don't want to sort of scare people. But we're in a scary situation now. So people are dying all around us. So see if we can make dharmic use of that fact, not just get horrified. And if you do get horrified, then come back to metta. Metta will sort of cushion you against the horrors of reality, if you like. But if you can do it with metta and shraddha, I have a conviction, now I don't know how deep it goes, but I have a conviction that death is okay. In the end, it's okay. Not the dying can be horrible, and for the people left behind, it's horrible. Horrible's too prosaic a word. I have a deeper intuition that death is okay, because it isn't the end, and somehow it's part of this journey that we've decided to be on. Now, I don't know whether I'll be able to contact that intuition when I come to die. I hope I will. That's what I'm practicing for, partly. But what I do want to do is to, when I die, if I have time to reflect, I want to reflect. I hope that I have reflections that say that my life was oriented towards truth and beauty and goodness as much as I was able to, and that I was trying to heed the call as much as I was able to. And believe me, I forget a lot of the time. A lot of the time I'm just like those children, running up and down, playing my silly games, trying to grasp the iPad or whatever it is. And I'm not too worried about that. I'm not too worried. I've got a long way to go. But as long as I'm practicing, trying, moving in the right direction, I don't worry too much about my shortcomings. So I just urge us to make use of this time to cultivate receptivity. Anyway, I'm going to pause there.
That's great. Thank you very much, Jnanavaca. Let's see whether there's any questions. That's very, very good to go into. And yeah, it's interesting as we go into these parables. We keep thinking, oh well, we'll get to the end today, and each symbol, each universal, Jnanavaca was saying, speaks so much. Let's just, I don't know whether there are any questions yet. I forgot actually to say earlier on that there'll be time for questions, I'm afraid. But also I want to make sure we finish in good time, a bit early before 8, so that we can all go and applaud the NHS. I want to try and even prepare us for that and sort of have us feeling that more directly even. But let's see if there are any questions along the way before anything else. So Matt,
if there are no questions,
if there are no questions, Jnanavaca can carry on talking.
So we've got a question from Sarjana.
Hello, Sarjana.
Nice to see you here. I was going to say nice to see you. I can't see you, but
we sort of see you, don't you?
Sort of see you. Yeah.
You're appearing very often. That's very good.
So Sarjana's saying that he's surprisingly content at home, even though he hasn't been out in 4 weeks. And he's been comparing his situation to the parable of the burning house. He says that his house is not burning as much as usual. And he says, is there a danger in that?
Well, I'm really glad that you're well, Sarjana, and that you are feeling content. I hope you and Sue are both doing well. It sounds like you are. And I don't think contentment is the same as complacency. I think if you're content, truly content, and you're reflecting on the Dharma, which you seem to be, then I don't think that's the same as complacency. I think that's a deeper sense of positivity that you're in touch with. Because it's interesting, when the Dharma says reflect on impermanence and sickness and death and a line that you're successfully reflecting isn't that you're in a panic, it's that it causes a deep sense of peace and contentment. That's what happens. So nevertheless, there probably are dangers. I'm not saying you're in danger. I don't know if you want to add anything.
I don't know. I mean, that's great, Sergeant. That's really, really good. I think it is also possible to think there's less fire than there is.
Right. Yeah.
I think we all probably. What you don't want is just to manage the world and make it seem less dangerous than it is. Well, from one point of view at least. But we perhaps better press on. There's a few other questions coming out, so let's just hear another one.
Anyway, thank you, Sergeant.
But yeah, good, really good, Sergeant. Well done.
More question from Manlio.
Oh, hello, Manlio.
Oh, Manlio.
I've been meaning to phone you, Manlio.
We should have been living with you, Manlio. But
yeah, Manlio was going to come and stay with us while some other friends were going off to be ordained.
We were practicing our Italian so that we could practice on Manlio.
But they didn't go off because the ordination course was cancelled. So anyway, Manlio's question. That's now we've introduced you to the world, Manlio.
In your own experience, was the process of hearing the call a gradual one, or looking back, can you see any breakthrough moment?
Shall I start? It was gradual, and there were breakthrough moments, if you see what I mean. I think for me, it was I started looking for something more meaningful in life from a very early age, particularly when my dad died. I was aged 11 when he died. I started looking for meaning, but I think it was even earlier than that. So in some sense, I was looking. I think children often do, for value and meaning. And then there were definitely sort of breakthrough moments, and particularly coming across the Dharma, and particularly coming across people who are practicing the Dharma. I remember being on my first retreat, and Maitreyabandhu was co-leading that first retreat, and me looking at Maitreyabandhu and thinking, he's got something. He's in touch with something real, something was sort of shining out from him, and that was a call. That was a bit of a breakthrough. I realised that here he was, a man not that much older than me, somebody that I could relate to, but who definitely had something that I wanted, of truth and meaning.
I was about to say I agree. I don't mean that. I also find I've had my own breakthrough moments, and it's gradual. It's interesting you mentioned your father's death. I think one of the first things for me was my mother and father took me to see my grandmother after she had died. I was only 7, I think, and I really thought, this is a massive issue here, and I instinctively knew that my parents didn't have any answers for him. But I feel the call is intrinsic to being human. It's not that you start to hear a call, or if it is, it's just because the noise around you quietens down to hear something that's already there. I think we come into life called, to use that metaphor, and it's whether there's enough quiet or something that shakes you enough to listen. But I don't think it starts. I think your life starts, but my instinct is
it's innate.
Yeah, it's innate. Yeah. There's another question as well. Great.
So,
thanks, Manu.
These are 2 questions which are both about puja. So Harvey's asked.
Hello, Harvey.
How you'd recommend doing puja alone?
Yeah, good point.
Also, Abby has asked, as someone who's new to Buddhist practice, what would be a simple way to create a puja at home for someone who's not used to this ritual?
Good. Thank you, Harvey and Abby. So, what I do when I do a puja alone is I just recite the words of the sevenfold puja. I do have a bell. I sit in front of my shrine. It's like I'm doing the puja in call and response, but there isn't a response. I'm just doing the puja. If you want the words of the sevenfold puja or any of the Triratna rituals, you can find them on the Buddhist Center online, or just type in Triratna puja and you'll get it. If you're new to Triratna rituals and pujas, well, again, try it. But you might want to, in a way, create your own ritual. You don't have to follow the words that we've got, but they do help. So I'd sort of try it. But certainly set up a shrine, light candles, decorate the shrine, have flowers, have an image of something, either the Buddha or something that you feel represents the ideal for you.
Yeah, create a place of meaning and beauty, a little place. We always have a puja on our full moon night, and on the YouTube channel there's a recording of me introducing a short puja, a threefold puja. So you might want to just listen to that and join in with that.
Yes.
Or you could go to the Buddhist Center online and look at the short puja. That's just threefold. It's not very long at all.
Yeah.
And light candles and
incense, and if you've got incense, or just create a lovely atmosphere.
If you know mantras, chant mantras, and just imagine that as you're doing that, human beings, just that lighting of a candle in the dark, in a way that says everything. Candles and flowers, in a way you don't need to be told what these symbolise. you just light them. You light incense. You say some words, and you know what it means instinctively. If you step out of your kind of highly critical sense, you try it out.
If you allow yourself, you enter into an imaginal world.
Yeah.
And that has a subtle but deceptively powerful effect.
Yeah.
If you let it. Yeah. Thanks, Harvey and Abby.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I think there's another question, is there?
Yeah, this is one from Anne, and
Anne, hello, Anne.
she says with both practices, mindfulness of breathing and Maitreyabandhu, she's finding that she's sort of losing the ability to meditate.
Anne, can you say more what you mean about losing the ability? You mean, we can try and guess, but you might mean
probably need a little bit more
losing the desire to do it, or just feeling you're getting nowhere with
Yes,
we'll come back to that then.
And if you can say a bit more information,
I quite like helpful. It that we can engage like this. Time is getting short, so we'll have to be a bit careful.
Okay, so we've got a question from Alexandra.
Hello, Alexandra.
Oh yeah, great. She lives over there.
She asks, do you believe receptivity can be cultivated and felt amongst a group of people, or is it always a personal experience that leads you to a sense of interconnectedness?
Oh, I'm sure it can be cultivated amongst a group of people. I think when we do a puja, for example, in a collective, we're sort of cultivating receptivity together.
Yeah.
When we meditate together, we're cultivating receptivity together. Even community living is part of the practice. Will be a sort of atmosphere that we create together amongst us, which can be more or less receptive to each other. How aware are we of our fellow community members and what's going on for them, not just literally, but what's happening in what their energy's like and what their feel is like. So I think all dharmic practice has a collective dimension to it.
Yeah.
Even solitary meditation, even when I was on a long solitary retreat meditating up in a mountain somewhere, there was a collective dimension in that imaginatively people were in my mind. Yeah.
I think let's see if we can get back to Anne's question sort of briefly, and then we'll try to round off, because I want to make sure we've got enough time.
Yes, we must finish at time.
Go out,
Yes. She says she's finding it just she can't concentrate.
I mean, one thing I think about people who say they can't concentrate, it's quite difficult to self-evaluate in meditation. It's quite difficult to know. I was meditating, I got up late, I'd had a bad night just recently, and I meditated just before lunch in our community, and I felt like you, frankly, and I just thought, I'm getting nowhere today, I can't concentrate. And then I got to the table, and I was clearly in a different state of mind, and it was a bit of, I got up a bit too quick, I didn't do what you were saying, and I just went to the table, and I thought, actually I was more concentrated than I think. So it's not always, because, especially if you've got quite a critical mind, as I have, it's easy not to quite give the level of, it's difficult to know. If you've ever picked up a phone in the middle of a meditation, you can suddenly realise that you're much more concentrated than you thought.
I've done that. But also our guided meditations, have a look for some guided meditations. They may or may not help.
That would help.
They may or may not help. There's probably lots more to explore, but sorry to cut it short because we've run out of time.
So, yes, we'll just to remind you to tune in any weekday at 7 o'clock. Jnanavaca is going to be talking again on Monday, the Monday Dharma class.
I am on Monday, so come join me on Monday.
Do join Jnanavaca then. Shraddha Gita actually is going to be talking tomorrow night, not Suragupta, so she'll be talking tomorrow night. Okay. And then, again, I think I'm teaching the meditation class on Wednesday, so keep tuning in. You've got one more thing to say, and then we'll finish.
Just that many of you have been giving money to Dana, to the centre, and I just want to say thank you, and to sort of say that the money is going to be really put to good use and is needed. I happen to know from many years of working at the LBC that we spend our money very, very well in terms of spreading the Dharma. All of our teaching, as much of our activities, is done on a basis of voluntary activity and donations. So we try and keep our costs as low as possible so that all the money can go towards, as much of the money can go towards directly spreading the Dharma. And at a time like this, where most of our activities have closed down, it would be really lovely if you could give. Many of you, as I say, have given. And if you can give more, or even if you can only give a little bit. I was saying last time I was saying this, that somehow giving helps you feel connected. So even if it's just £1 a month, that would create some sense of you being part of the connected activities of the centre. If you can give monthly, that would be the best, most helpful thing, particularly for us now. But one-off donations, that'd be great, whatever you can give.
And if you can click on the link underneath this film,
yes,
that takes you to the Just Giving page.
And it will also be in the chat comments.
So we're going to finish with the transference of merit and self-surrender. And what I thought is that as we do this, it's like as we go into then clapping. So we can think of this as being our wanting to give blessing, give well-wishing, transfer whatever good we've done to everyone in the world, but perhaps particularly at this moment, anyone that's helping people in difficulty. So perhaps recite after me if you're comfortable to. May the merit gained.
May the merit gained.
In my acting thus.
In my acting thus.
Go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings.
Go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings.
My personality throughout my existences.
My personality throughout my existences.
My possessions.
My possessions.
And my merit in all three ways.
And my merit in all three ways.
I give up without regard to myself.
I give up without regard to myself.
For the benefit of all beings.
For the benefit of all beings.
Just as the earth and other elements.
Just as the earth and other elements.
Are serviceable in many ways.
Are serviceable in many ways.
To the infinite number of beings.
To the infinite number of beings.
Inhabiting limitless space.
Inhabiting limitless space.
So may I become.
So may I become.
That which maintains all beings.
That which maintains all beings.
Situated throughout space.
Situated throughout space.
So long as all have not attained.
So long as all have not attained.
To peace.
To peace. Thank you.
Thank you very much.